All right. This is the Something Ventured podcast. Welcome back. Eric Hall is my guest today. It's good to have you back at this table.
I'm the first one that can be like, I'm back.
That's true. You know, it's funny. Actually, I'll do the introduction in a second.
Okay.
But, you know, I watched Charlie Rose, and he says it's good to have you back at this table. I think I see why. It's you are back, and we're at this table. It's like it's the most obvious thing to say. So this is the Something Ventured podcast in which and I'm going to get this professionally done soon. This is where we take a look behind the headlines in Silicon Valley as I sit down with the movers and shakers, the up-and-comers. I forget there's another one, too. Oh, the seasoned veterans. As we explore the reality behind the headlines. I don't remember how that all goes. It was written by my friend who wrote it is a showrunner in L.A., and his show is coming out this Saturday. It's called OMG EMT, and it's like I think it's like a cops kind of thing. But EMTs.
Like parody.
No, I think it's like
real.
Well, it's like Cops is like real, but
Okay, I was thinking not Cops, but the Reno 911.
yeah, no,
okay.
It's not like that.
I see. Okay.
So he wrote this lovely thing which I botched, but it's like amazing. It's the thing he wrote. It's when you download the podcast. It's that thing that he wrote, but he wrote it in like 5 minutes. He's like a showrunner, and he writes for shows and stuff. So you're like, oh yeah, that's what those guys do.
Yeah.
Like they're so goddamn good. Like not just anyone can go to Hollywood and figure it out. So anyway, we're going to talk today. What are we going to talk about today?
We have lots of stuff we
talked about sound. So it's May 1st. It's May Day here in San Francisco. And for those of you listening around the world, and part of this podcast is to bring people into San Francisco, into Silicon Valley. There's a protest today. And San Francisco has a really weird form of protest, right? Like it's well, first of all, if you're protesting in San Francisco, nobody cares, right? Because like everyone knows that you're opposed to everything, right?
Right.
Like no one's like, oh, geez, San Francisco's for the war this time. Like, that's crazy. So like your vote kind of doesn't count for starters. And then everyone's kind of protesting their own thing. Like
That's what's exactly, yeah.
Everyone's like, well, yeah, I'm against the war, but then I'm also against like Nicaraguan
And police brutality.
Exactly, and yeah. And by the way, and then there's another weird thing. Everyone dresses up in costumes. Like every day here, like every adult seems to think that they're like a 7 or 8 year old Disney princess. So it was May Day today. What is that? It's a labor thing, right?
I don't know, actually. I'm unfamiliar with the kind of origins there.
Well, I know what the 5th is.
Yes.
Cinco de Mayo. So this is actually our 8th episode of this podcast. And as I've said, when I get to 10 episodes, I read this on the internet. I go into syndication. I make $100 million.
Wow.
It's pretty
sign
good.
me up for that.
It's pretty good.
Wow.
So I have I do have one sound question for you.
Okay.
We agreed
All right.
not to talk
All right.
about sound.
No, that's
sound
okay. We can
question.
go back.
And this goes to something I have, but product people are like people who manage products. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So I have my Sonos system, which is a lovely system. It's a lovely product. It's
a good product.
It's the thing that what is it? It lets you like easily. It's like the same speakers as everyone else, but it just lets you set it up really easily. Is that pretty much the concept on Sonos?
Yeah.
So I was playing some music. Let's say it was Miles Davis or something, and I pressed pause, and a little dialogue came up and said, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Well, now let's just review." I was playing music on my Sonos, and the button was pause.
Yeah.
This was not the like destroy Tokyo button, for example, right? Where you like, oh yeah, and then it's like, "Are you sure?" And so I was like pretty sure.
Was it a voice that came over the speaker?
No, it was like it's a little like thing.
A thing like on the readout, the LCDs?
Yeah, like it was like a an interstitial, like before you press pause, are you sure? So then I was like pretty sure. And then I was like, well, what are the implications?
Right.
Like, you put this thing there. I was talking to like the people at work today. I was like, we were just talking, there was some product we were looking at. It was just ridiculous. And it just seems like if half the product managers in Silicon Valley went away and just stopped doing anything, we'd be fine. I don't feel like my Sonos needed
Are you sure?
The second.
I don't know. You might have found a hidden feature of like time travel or something.
Yeah, and then they put it there, and you're like, well, is there maybe something does happen? Like maybe I'll have to reset everything, or something terrible happens to somebody in another country, or like I don't know.
The button.
Yeah, that's still from a Twilight Zone or something, right? All right, so we'll talk about our kind of vaguely defined topic, but I think something around the difference between going to work at a startup in Silicon Valley and working at a company. Is that generally what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, but also, kind of trying to wrap my head around mobility, upward mobility in both and contrasting them, what does it take? Well, I'll draw from this experience. So I actually worked at a startup years and years ago during the
and now to frame it, you work at a very large, very successful company.
40 years old. Yeah,
exactly.
Closing in on 50.
Yeah, exactly.
So in 1999, I went to shoot off and work for a little startup that was an offshoot of Diageo. Do you know Diageo?
Yeah, it's a liquor thing.
It is.
It's a big liquor thing.
It's the largest liquor distributor in the world, in fact.
All right, I'm now skeptical that we have a startup involved in this story, but okay.
So they decided to start this little tech venture in a conference room, of all places, shoved 20 of us into a small conference room, to investigate the ability of using a Palm Pilot sort of device to scan barcodes of liquor bottles in various drinking establishments as a means of inventory control.
Yeah. Okay, so we should pause here. There used to be a band called Destiny's Child. Okay. There used to be a thing called a Palm Pilot.
Right, yeah.
So,
well, this was I should qualify that. It wasn't a Palm Pilot. It was the Symbian, I think is what the other,
holy crap.
Remember the Symbian, the larger one thing with the big yellow button on it?
Yeah, exactly.
That was the more sort of professional sized, bars code scanning device.
Yeah.
So, we're at this startup, and of course, there's at least 3 or 4 25-year-old vice presidents at this thing, which is a part of a spin-off of a topic I want to get to, a handful of directors, and of course, I'm the IT lackey guy in the crew here.
Right.
And so we're crammed in this room, and we finally get our own space eventually, and there's only about 20 of us, and we're there's not really a lot of money being made, but it seems like it's more of an interest of the brand to try to see what can happen here. So we actually go to bars and help them do their inventory management with this barcode scanner. And most of the bars aren't really terribly interested in it, and it's a more hassle. They're happy with the paper napkin method of inventory management.
Right.
So, but what's interesting, what came from that idea is instead of convincing the bars to use it as inventory management, what they started to do is we started to pay the bars to use it to get drinking data.
Really?
So then we started to sell, so the parent company, Diageo, started to kind of just get that data back, and they were happy just with that sort of kind of circle of data, which is, hey, guess what? Like Smirnoff is more popular in San Francisco than Sky vodka is, just based on the fact that we're scanning all the barcodes in the bar. I thought that was fairly interesting. It was kind of a very unique way to kind of go about it.
Yep.
But eventually, like many things, they dried up, and it was gone. And then I had to go on to the next venture.
Well, that actually sounds like a great business model. I love those business models where they're doing one thing, but then it's something else. Like the whole trick is something else.
It turned out to be something else. It was completely put it on its head because everyone's like, oh, we're going to make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Inventory management, because there was this whole tie-in with, like the distributors. So you scan your barcode and then they show up the next day with your case of Smirnoff because they know you're out.
Yeah.
As opposed to the phone call and that sort of deal.
Yeah, there's a couple early Facebook. There's another company that started the same time Facebook did called InCircle or something like that. They did the same thing with college campuses. They were getting the same results. So when Facebook started and this other company, they'd go to Stanford, Harvard, they'd launch, and within 2 days, 90% of the school would be on this thing. It happened to InCircle. It happened to them at campus, and they made the decision to package it up as a piece of enterprise software and sell it to universities. Oh man. And Facebook was like, no, we should just make this free, and then we'll figure out how to make money. And $3 billion a quarter later, they figured it out.
Well, because that was back in the day, you would still go to Egghead software.
Yeah, right,
and you'd walk the aisles.
Yeah.
And
again, there used to be a band called Destiny's Child.
Software would be on a shelf.
Yeah.
that in itself just sounds so foreign to me now.
Well, and ironically now, on the iPhone and Android, in this weird way, we've got this weird thing where we've gone back. We've gone back to it a little bit, where you now download separate software for everything. But But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, there was one point at which the only way you could get on the internet was to go to Best Buy and buy the Netscape Navigator, go home, install it, and then you're magically on the internet at that point.
Right. So how did you get to a startup job like in 1999? Like what was where did it start with the computers for you? Like what was the...
For me, it was 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, 1984.
Auspicious.
Yes. Apple IIc.
You saw the ad.
Apple IIc for Christmas. It was amazing. I was so happy.
Right.
I had the 300 baud modem.
Oh, crap.
The dot matrix printer.
Nice.
And I was playing, like wizardry as much as I could.
That is a fine rig.
I was 10 years old, actually.
Yeah, right.
So I was on the BBSs. Remember the old BBSs back in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. Man, it's going way back, but it's I was on when they had, it was like Gopher and Waze and Veronica, which were ways that you could log into computer systems all over the world.
So this predates that.
Holy crap.
BBSs were some dude, usually in his mom's basement, who had loads of modems.
Right.
And you direct dial right into his system.
Yes.
And he would run what they called a bulletin board, BBS's bulletin board system.
Yes, right.
And they would just have people posting random things, and they'd have little games, and it was all text driven, of course. Like there no clicking or
I absolutely remember. What I remember about that time too was that when I did that, I lived in San Diego, and you'd log into a computer in Minnesota, and you were like, "Holy crap! I'm here,
right,
in San Diego, and a machine in like Minnesota, University of Minnesota." Is like responding to my like that was just a huge, and now you don't know where the hell your data is or anything. It's not that big a deal anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember in the moment it was pretty.
You feel exposed. I felt like, oh my gosh, what, can they see me?
Yeah. Oh right.
Like, can something happen to me now? Is the FBI going to come knocking on my door?
Yeah. And what do we learn? 20 years later, yes, they can. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's one of the topics on the more serious topics I'm cover on this program and want to talk to many more women about is sexism in Silicon Valley is a topic. What's interesting, and so a lot of people kind of conclude, well, if you're in Silicon Valley, like it's not that women aren't discriminated against, but this will make sense in a second. But you could find a job at a decent company if you wanted to that's respectful of women.
Absolutely.
But there aren't enough women developers.
Yeah.
So then they go back to, well, the schools must be doing something.
Right.
Which is, it's an interesting concept. However, everybody I know who ended up being a developer or whatever it is, they ended up there with a story like yours. It wasn't, the school was pushing all the boys into computers. It was like, I don't know, I was 10. I was like deep into Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, and I wasn't actually being pushed. I was probably,
Well, I moved out here to start a career as a psychologist.
Yeah.
Actually.
But what the hell? What? How does that work?
I moved out here in 98 with my girlfriend at the time. We were going to go to grad school together, actually, at the Wright Institute.
To be a psychologist.
To be a psychologist.
Wow.
Yeah, my undergrad degree is in psych. I worked as a crisis counselor for a few years, actually.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's got to be crazy.
In an outpatient clinic, yeah. It was pretty intense, being like 23 years old and thinking you have something idea what you're doing.
Yeah, right. Wow,
that could be another subject
of
a future podcast.
That's a heavy... Yeah,
it was heavy stuff.
Yeah.
It was heavy stuff, and I think so. We came out here together.
Yeah.
She went to school.
Right.
I decided to kind of pursue this other career because I'm thinking, let's make some money. Right. Let me figure out if I want to do this.
Yeah.
She starts school. It's very intense for her.
Mm-hmm.
We end up breaking up, and I kind of keep climbing this tech ladder. I'm like, wow, this is great. I'm making a bunch of money. I'm having fun.
Yeah.
I was always a geek, hidden away, but there was no career path in the 90s for this.
Right.
There was no information technology school,
Right.
I mean, I remember information technology was usually like library science or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's really, I do, when I talk to some women who, obviously went to school, I want to get into like, how did it how did that work? Like when, I just recall the schools not encouraging anybody to go into computers. That may have changed over time.
There was no computer curriculum at where I went to school, Michigan State, other than computer science, which was either like hardware or software. That software wasn't really even fully developed yet. It was like hardware, computer engineering,
and it wasn't at the time like the rock star thing to do. No. It wasn't clear. I mean, so I guess when we went to school, it's kind of the end of when being a doctor was the cool thing. There's this period, you want to be a doctor, right before managed care And then it was the people who I think were graduating from med school in the 80s to 90s. You know, if you're going to medicine to be noble, that's still the case.
Right.
But if you're one of those guys who's like, hey, that's the highest paid job around,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a doctor, and you didn't really give a damn about being a doctor, but you did it. That was kind of the year you got your,
Yeah,
bummer for you.
I would say in Michigan State at the time, business school was the thing. Like the early 90s,
Okay,
that was it. You go to business school, you want to succeed. You know, it was kind of the launch of, the economy was starting to take off.
Yeah.
Early Clinton era.
Yeah.
Right. And business school seemed to be the hip. That was the cool thing on campus.
Yeah,
that's what everyone wanted
I went
to
to Kellogg,
do.
yeah.
Eli Broad is one of the founders of the
real estate company.
Yeah, he is a massive contributor and has a college named after him at Michigan State.
He's the
business college.
the Broad and Kaufman guy.
Yep.
That guy.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy's that's the way you make money, by the way. Like in Silicon Valley. Mark Andreessen's married to whatever her last name is, Arriaga. Mm-hmm. And if you look at any property down in Silicon Valley, there's always this sign that says Perry Arriaga. They own everything.
Yeah.
It's him. It's like
that.
the guys who just owned Sand Hill Road.
Yeah.
So so psychology, like how do you, what makes you go, I want to do that?
Well,
like,
there's an interesting correlation there because if you think about, so my very first entry into IT was phone support, right? So I'm doing phone support, which people call in often quite angry and frustrated.
I do.
So coincidentally,
I'm not proud of myself when I call those guys sometimes because I've generally done the turned it on, turned it off.
Yeah. Have you tried to turn it off and on again?
Yeah.
So I'm only like 1 or 2 years removed from a job where I am on the phone keeping people from killing themselves.
Yeah. Right.
Literally.
Yeah.
To being on the phone to keep people from killing themselves because their computer doesn't work.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's kind of how it started. That was the launch, and then it just kind of went organically from there, and I just found my career path.
So you're that guy on the phone, like what? So how often is it actually you need to turn your computer on and off, or how often are you like, I don't know, man. Like sucks to be you. Like I can't make that work.
There was a script. So it was Pac Bell Internet at the time. It was Pac Bell Internet support. It was right when DSL came, like 99, 98.
Yeah.
And the majority of people, you follow a script of like 2 or 3 different issues and you get them through it. You talk them through it.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
Interesting.
For the most part. There was some stuff, we call support boundaries. That was the big thing. That was the big buzzword. You try to find, you find a way to not support them.
Right. Yeah.
They're like, so what operating system are you using? Linux. Oh, we don't support Linux.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, man, I've been there.
Let you go.
It's that guy. It's the other guy. Oh, man, I just talked to the other guy. He said it was you guys. Like, I'm so screwed.
You're kind of that guy.
Yeah.
And then from there, that's where not soon after the Pac Bell support, I ended up at a couple of startups. And then before I knew it, I was at Dolby. And then on the kind of career path that I've forged there.
We had interesting this week. We had somebody come in to our office from NPR, with like the microphone in hand, and they wanted to interview people about the difference between a coder, a hacker, and a developer. It was like I didn't do it.
You couldn't.
I let someone else do it.
Yeah.
Well, so we here what we're gonna. And I was gonna ask you what the difference is between what you do and a coder, hacker, and developer because you actually do something different. But we were like, we should go tell her there's no difference. They're all the same thing, right? Basically.
Yeah.
And but we're like, we should just tell her there's a big. We should like. I was saying this. Okay, so coders. Here's the deal. So the coders all come from Iceland, but it's like the northern part of Iceland. There's hackers are in the south, and then see if they would
to buy this story.
Yeah, we're like, let's just screw with them. But didn't have the heart to go through with it. But you do something different from writing code.
Sure.
Right.
I would say I facilitate those things.
Yeah.
Via hardware.
Yeah.
Or connectivity.
And so what is that? Like, what does that look like? Like, what is that?
That's the room with all the buzzing servers and the aisles of fans
cool.
and
it's
lights.
Cool, right?
Yes.
No, it's not cool. It's hot.
It is hot. There's hot aisles and there's cool aisles.
What the? Okay, what's going on with this?
You align your server room, right? So you want the front of the servers, which are sucking in that air.
Yeah.
That's called the cold aisle because you want to take that cold air into the front.
Wow.
And then you spit it out the back, which is the hot aisle.
That is crazy.
So that's why when you build those aisles and aisles, you'll see that they're arranged in such a way that the hot air and the cold air never intermingle.
Yeah.
They're separated usually.
Now, do you interface? So it used to be as you built a company, you would go to a data center that you would rent and you'd put in a bunch of servers and you'd go in and you deal with them, basically.
Yeah.
And now we kind of have cloud computing.
Yeah.
Where you just buy the services you need by the minute, hour, whatever the hell it is. But the data center didn't go away. So did all those people who used to be like whatever the hell they called them, you know, literally racking servers and jacking into the servers. And,
That's me.
Yeah,
That's
right,
what
for
me,
air conditioning. Like, but where'd they all go? Like,
a lot of them
go work for rack space in
exactly.
AWS?
That's exactly where they went. If they wanted to continue on that career path, they would have to go to those larger providers.
Yeah.
Because as a good example, and what we're working on right now as a project is we are moving a fair amount of our equipment to a co-location provider.
Yeah.
So like your kind of cage, as it's called in the industry.
Yeah.
Where you have, like our servers are here and then Yahoo might be there and Google might be there.
Yeah.
But the model is definitely shrinking. So what would have been, maybe 20, 30, 40 racks of servers is really only about 10.
Right.
Because those 10 other racks are over at Box or over at another hosted provider, or Amazon Web Services, for example, like you brought up.
So is there a hierarchy in this? Like the people who write the code, the people who keep the things operating, like how does that all work? Like what's the...
I think it's a fairly even playing field.
Yeah.
In that, we all kind of work together to achieve that common goal.
Yeah.
But, I would say in my experience, development is outsourced much more commonly than infrastructure services.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it seems to me, I was thinking about it, that I would think of a developer might be something like an architect in the sense of like, oh, I wrote all this shit down on a piece of paper. But then the ops guy or the IT guy's like, yeah, okay, now I got to actually make this happen.
Exactly.
Like he's the contractor. And so I'm sure the architect's like, well, I thought of all this shit, so I'm a genius. And then but then the construction worker's like, yeah, but you've never built anything, and that's what the challenge is. Like you need both of them,
right.
But they both probably think they've got it all figured out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what? So rather than going to a series of startups, you went and worked your way up a company.
Yeah. It was. It just sort of happened that way. I mean, I never thought in a million years I would be that guy at that company for 15 years.
Yeah.
I just never thought it would ever occur, especially in quote unquote the Valley. You know, with all this opportunity around me, how is it that I could stay in one place? And the main reason was the challenge was there. Like I was getting challenged every day by technology and also being able to play with all the latest stuff. Like we had the budget.
Right.
I think that's probably the key.
Yeah.
At the core, one of the ideas is a lot of guys I've interviewed who are looking for new jobs, looking to kind of jump.
Yeah.
They're jumping because they don't get to play with the latest toys.
Yeah, right.
They're not getting that opportunity to, I've never been able to do this sort of deployment. I want to do that.
Yeah. Well, and you have, it's interesting. You have, first of all, I think many more people work at companies like yours than you would think from reading the press. You would think everyone works at a startup.
Yeah.
But in fact, these big companies employ thousands of people. And they're where they are because they're successful. Like the startups want to be like your company. Like
Absolutely.
You want to be a multi-billion-dollar company with thousands of people. So it's always funny when people are like, oh, Microsoft's a big bureaucracy. It's like, yeah, because they were a little company that succeeded. Like bureaucracies succeed. That's how companies last for hundreds of years.
Exactly.
Or whatever it is, scores of years. Like that's how that works. So yeah, I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people recently who work in different jobs at big gaming companies and things like that. And they're like, wait, I mean, here's an interesting point of view. And then we can talk about how you kind of move within these companies.
Yeah.
That I was talking to a venture capitalist. He's like, and this is pretty cynical. It's pretty dark, but Silicon Valley is really built for a few people, like the founders. And all these people go to work for these companies, taking much less than they'd get paid in a corporation. Every few years, getting $100,000 or $200,000, bump of options that would have been their annual bonus if they just stayed at McKinsey.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of like people who play the lottery. It's like, oh, I think I'm going to win. You're not. Like statistically, yes, a couple guys at Facebook made a bunch of money, but you're actually not. And yet that powers these millions of hours of work. And what you should actually do is just go to a big company and take some of that money and invest it in startups if you have to, but don't invest your whole career on it. Silicon Valley, in that sense, is sort of a tax on people who don't really understand math. It's the old lottery joke. But working in a company like yours, it seems like there's a more clear path to what you're doing. At the top, there's the CEO. You're somewhere between the CEO and
the bottom.
Do they have mailrooms anymore?
They have mailroom.
I don't know.
We have a mailroom.
Is there a guy who pushes a cart?
There is a guy that pushes a cart.
Wow.
Yeah.
That can't be going on for much longer. But
Yeah.
so how do you? So what is like? So what? So when you wake up, you're in a startup, which is kind of what I do. You're like, oh shit, we got to make this thing succeed, or we're gonna run out of money, and everyone's unemployed.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're thinking in a bigger company. You're like, this is working pretty well. What's the like? What forms a day for you? Like what? Like how do you think about? Oh, okay, 2 years this, 5 years that.
Yeah. There's a lot of things I would say. There's your long-term projects, your short-term projects. I think the exciting part that I feel more and more in touch with than I have ever before in my career is to the business itself. Like there are some business initiatives right now that will result in a product.
Right.
And so there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes to eventually help launch that product.
Right.
And so being in touch with that kind of, that vision, that dream, that sort of, appetite, or that just the company it's almost hinging upon its success, is hinging upon the success of this product.
Yeah, right.
So that's, I think, the exciting part. That's what keeps me going, and that's what kind of keeps our budget hot and being able to buy new stuff and spend money and have all these initiatives.
Now, is there a leader who's like, yeah, this is the vision, and everyone wakes up and goes, this is incredible, this is amazing?
I think there's a lot. I think what's interesting about Dolby is that it's distributed. There are people all over the world with great ideas.
Yeah.
And they share them.
Yeah.
And every now and then, VPs pluck those ideas out of these departments, and we're like, we're going to run with this.
Yeah.
And then they do it.
Oh, so you guys are doing things right.
I think so.
That's the right way to do it for a big company.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting that we're in such a sort of startup culture here in Silicon Valley, and yet, first of all, we're all aspiring to be a company like yours, and second of all, there's a lot of companies like this, right? Like if Facebook or Twitter or Google or whatever it is, right? This is what they are. They're huge companies. They have HR departments with hundreds of people,
funny,
right?
They're a huge company. They have an HR department.
Yeah. Which does a very valuable thing, right?
Right.
Like you look at like Google and they're hiring what are they hiring? People per day is like 100 people a day.
Wow.
Well, it makes sense. Like, that's whatever 100 people a day is like if you're hiring 36,000 people a year or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like enormous. Like but that's what you need.
Right.
It's not like these companies, it's not like the CEO goes, oh, I want an HR department. That would be cool.
Right.
Like they need one and then people quit.
Well, I think on the topic of startup, Dolby has always interested me because I feel like we're at that next level.
Yeah.
There's like this second plateau with a corporation, which is how do you go from big to really big?
Yeah, right.
And the words that go around like we want to be a $2 billion company is what they always say. Like our leaders come out and they tell us these,
sure.
these all hands meetings.
Yeah.
And so right now we're about 500 million of annual.
Yeah, right.
And how do we get to that next level?
Right.
What does that formula look like? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And we've struggled with it. Despite amazing advances in technology and this cool thing here and this cool thing there.
Yeah.
Nothing's really ever just popped.
Yeah.
Where everyone's just like, holy cow, I need to have that Dolby thing.
Yeah, right. So it's all the same stuff. Like the same thing you're doing in a startup. Who is it? You're a psychology guy. What's the his name has a lot of consonants in it, but he wrote the book called Flow.
I'm not familiar.
FLOW, Flow.
No.
And so they did the University of Chicago. They did this They did a test where they asked people to click this button when they were happy, like throughout the day, and they figured out however the hell they did. I never know how they do these experiments, but what they figured out is people weren't happy when they were like sitting on a beach,
Really?
and they were or most fulfilled or whatever, and they weren't happy when they were like just getting screwed by life. They were happiest when they had a difficult problem and were succeeding at overcoming it.
Yeah.
Like doing a puzzle and like, I'm getting it, like 10 more pieces and I'm done.
Yeah.
And so it seems like whether you're doing a startup, you're like, oh, users are using us. Or you're in an enormous company and you're like, hey, we're successfully beating that guy, whoever the other guy is. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like it's the same motivations. It's the same feeling of satisfaction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people perceive that there's sort of a cynical thing going on in those companies where people are like, I'm just working here. And
I'm sure there's a handful of people that are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and having worked, I worked at Deloitte, like fairly big companies. Like there aren't, like at Deloitte and Touche at the time, we would basically try to we'd eliminate the bottom 10% of the company every year. Right, because that's just how it accrued.
Yeah.
And because otherwise you get all the good people move on and all the people who, who stay aren't the best people. So, I mean, I think companies are pretty good at rooting that stuff out.
I think so. It started recently at Dolby, I would say. There's definitely complacency, though.
Yeah. It's different, but I think that's part of the trade-off, too. That's how the company recruits. So, like, you're not going to be worth $1 billion. You're not going to be worth $1 billion as the startup either, but you don't believe that.
Right.
But you're going to get these benefits, and we're not going to go out of business when the economy goes down, and
Well, yeah. I mean, plus I don't know the specifics exactly, but I can say that engineers who are on the patent itself, get a much higher. They actually become part of the revenue.
Well, what do you mean on the patent?
When we actually patent things, right?
Of course,
so when we patent Dolby Atmos, for example, is one of the most recent things.
Yeah.
Whoever's on that patent, I would bet. That they're getting more money from some other revenue stream than the guy that sat next to him and didn't do Dolby Atmos.
Didn't get on the patent.
Right. He's actually on the patent.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So is it like the capital city? Is it like Game of Thrones? Like, are people killing each other?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you that. You've sat in those in those tables, right? You've sat on the king's the hand of the king.
Yeah. I'm not that guy. Like I've never been. So I worked at Deloitte & Touche, which was just they're a fabulously well run company, and a company like Deloitte & Touche is very. It's a consulting firm, tax accounting. So it's the metrics are very clear. You do work for hours, you charge for those hours. Your clients are angry or they're not. Like, it's not very theoretical, like who's doing well and who's doing poorly.
Yeah.
And they were great. They were great at promoting women and stuff like that. So I've never worked at a really like horrible, people say Oracle or something like that. It's a horrible culture. I've never worked in one of those. It's always been mostly like low drama. I know that's not always the case, but drama in a company has always seemed kind of crazy to me. It's like a company like.
Well, I think you're also hitting on kind of why I've been there for 14 years is, despite the ups and downs that normal people experience, that big drama is not there.
Yeah.
We have smart people who you want to see succeed.
Yeah. And that's generally a well-run company, too. I was talking to, I heard something interesting. I was talking to someone who works at PayPal, and whoever the executives are at PayPal. He was like, there's X of us, whatever, just 7 of us are running the company, and nobody wants anybody else's job, so it's great. And I think there's something to that. Like, when nobody wants anybody else's job, and you're all just doing the thing, like, life is pretty good.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm the CFO. I don't want to be the sales guy. The sales guy doesn't want to be the CFO. The CFO doesn't want to do the technical work, and the technical guy doesn't want to be bought, And then you get the product guy and the tech guy who are going back and forth. Or, when people start overlapping is when you have, going back to my original thought, that half of the product people in Silicon Valley should just stop. Like, walk away from your product. We don't need you. We'd be fine if you all became nurses, which we need more of. You guys would all be fine.
We do.
So that's the corporate choice, like in Silicon Valley. Like, does it feel weird, like hanging out with all the, going to isn't there a bar over by Dolby where all the Zynga guys go?
There is the dreaded Mars bar.
Oh, yeah, right.
All of the Zynga folks make their way.
Although Zynga's not exactly like a little,
No.
It's not like 4 guys and a dog. There's a dog.
There is a dog.
Spoiler alert.
Right.
But it's not just a couple of dudes, right?
No. But it's a lot of people under 25, I think, from what I've seen.
Yeah, with their kicking their little scooters down the street.
I feel bad for them. They work so much. All I hear about is how many hours these poor folks are putting in with no return on their time. Yeah. But that's kind of that game that you were talking about before.
Yeah. It's a
that little carrot.
If you really look at, and this guy who told me that was pretty thoughtful guy. He's like, if you just went to McKinsey, for most people, just go to McKinsey or whatever and get paid $600,000 a year with a $300,000 bonus versus $75,000 a year with your options being worth, $2
or $3 million. Yeah.
If you're lucky. And that's not even what happens.
Right,
they're worth like nothing to 150,000 or something like that. It's a really, it's something to, look, it could be the entire American dream is built on that kind of a concept, right? Like, I'm going to work really hard and make it and get a house and get a mortgage. So it's probably not unique to Silicon Valley,
sure. It's like that strike it big is the unique to Silicon Valley, though.
Yeah.
That the lottery fever concept.
Yeah, and law firms, partnership-driven law firms and accounting firms have always run on that, which is you've got one person of every 10 who wants to be partner makes it. But obviously all 10 of them think they're going to make it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I was just reading this in some is that book Denial of Death? Which is a survey of Freud, Kant, like all those guys. And he was talking about people are in denial about a lot of things. Like when everybody goes to war, like no one thinks they're the one who's going to die. They're like, oh man, I'm glad I'm not that guy next to me, right? That guy is like, he's not going to make it. So there you go. Silicon Valley, man. It's just big denial of death.
It is.
It's dark.
Well, what's interesting is spinning it back to Dolby.
Yeah.
Is I was in the IPO for Dolby. We went public in 2004.
Wow.
So I got my ISOs and I got my whole little payout. Yeah. But it was completely unintentional. I had this whole other vision that only came for little startup people.
Yeah.
But then here I am at this 40-year-old company.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to go public finally. And it happened.
Yeah. It's just got to be enormously satisfying. I mean, I talked to somebody who works at Apple, of course, is great, but it's a big, 60,000 people work there? I don't know what it is. And it's funny, you talk to him, he's been there for like 15 years, and he's moving into a new building in 2 years. Like, his whole, he's not even thinking, there's not even part of him where he's like, well, maybe I'll go, take time off, or maybe I'll go work somewhere else, or whatever the hell it is. He's just like, as far as he knows, he'll be at Apple for 10 more years or 15 more years, which has got to be like relieve some form of stress or just put you in a different state with respect to your company, I guess.
Yeah. Are there a lot of long timers over there? Do you know?
Probably. I think so. I think
there is.
I think it's a lovely place to work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing the right thing, it's either a second, Microsoft. There's apparently a level at Microsoft that's great to be at. Like, it's not the highest level because you're in the fights and the political stuff, but there's a level. Someone was telling me, like, I don't know what it's called, but it's below that, like below VP, where you're getting paid enormously well. You have all the perks and benefits. You've got, whatever time to pick up your kids and all that kind of stuff, and you're not really in the scrum for this VP versus that VP. Mm-hmm. It's, living in Seattle is supposed to be like a lovely place to work.
Yeah, yeah.
It's supposed to be great. All right, so we covered the corporate topic. Are we?
I think so. That's quite exhaustive. Yeah,
it's good. Well, and so as I kind of said on this journey of this podcast, the idea is to kind of cover Silicon Valley, which is not to cover the cartoon vision of Silicon Valley, which is a bunch of 25-year-olds in a world where the average person is 43. I think is the average entrepreneur's age. In a world where the average person probably works at a big company, like probably works at Intel. I don't have that data, but probably works at Intel, Dolby, or Apple. On average, doesn't work in a 5-person startup. So, covering the corporations of Silicon Valley fits into there too.
So, have you had much? Well, I mean, you're kind of hot and heavy in the whole mix right now.
Yeah.
Have you are the days of the 25-year-old VP, are those gone, or those still remain?
I don't think so. They're still there, but I think Silicon Valley is just becoming a more. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, they still have it.
Yeah.
But I think it's becoming a more serious place too. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was one guy who did it when he was like 23.
Yeah.
But that's not really...
But he executed. He actually did something. He didn't just walk in and was like, oh, I'm the only guy in IT. I guess I'm the VP of IT.
Yeah, and he started the company that a 23-year-old would start. He started 20-year-old. I mean, he was in college.
Yeah.
And he said this is what people in college need. But he didn't start a diabetes, health management company. He didn't start a payment company. Yeah. And that's when it gets ridiculous. When like a 22-year-old starts like a payments company. Like when a guy from Visa starts a payments company, goes, there's this one thing that I just cannot believe that no one's ever done. I'm leaving. So I just think Silicon Valley is becoming a more serious place in some sense.
Yeah, I know. I would definitely agree because they always talk about the new bubble, which might be a good segue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I traded stock back in the day of the .com as well. Yeah. I was an active trader.
Yeah.
And valuation was a joke.
Yeah.
There was no such thing.
Yeah.
Now it's a very serious thing. It's serious in the sense of how are you monetized? Like, how are you making money? Are you making money? Back before in the days where just having a .com somehow created valuation for your company.
Well, and it was such like the Wild West. I mean, a lot of questions have been answered, right? Like, I think advertising's moving to the internet. If you have a large audience, if you have 100
Large
million
audience.
people,
Yes.
if you have 100 million people,
Right.
you will make money. You will sell ads. Maybe you'll target them. Maybe you won't. Maybe it'll be the display format, but you won't not make money. And I think you had companies like, the jokes of the pets.com and this, that, and the other thing.
I was just going to make one, actually.
Right. Where people had no idea how. Now it's like, okay, if you have a company that. Mark Andreessen talked about this recently, where he said, look, these companies may be overvalued, like Dropbox or Uber, but by like 50%. Maybe they're getting valued at $2 billion and they're worth like $1 billion.
Right.
But they're not getting valued at like $2 billion, but they're worthless. These companies that generate hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, doing things like transporting people in the case of Uber, connecting people in the case of Facebook, helping merchants sell in the case of Square. So I think it's probably a bubble. $10 billion valuations can't last, but there's a little more metric to it at this point.
That's a good way to put it. There's a much stronger metric behind it.
Like WhatsApp has 450 million users, like the biggest TV show. How I Met Your Mother goes off the air. It's got 12 million people for the big finale. Like WhatsApp has 10 of those, and another 10 of those, and another 10 of those.
Right.
And they're adding one of those every day.
Yeah.
Like it's just but the thing about bubbles is like they just last longer or shorter than you predict. It's like Alan Greenspan said, the market can stay irrational a lot longer than you can stay liquid. So so I thought we'd comment on this article. I was reading the New York Times this weekend, and there's another article about San Francisco. This is almost like becoming a feature of the podcast, and I'm not even asking for it. They just keep giving it to me. But yeah, in the New York Times, there was an article called "If a Bubble Bursts in Palo Alto, Does It Make a Sound?" And it's like yet another... Like, what is it that you wake up in New York City and you go, man, there's nothing going on. Nothing going on in this town. Nothing going on in Chicago. San Francisco. We got to cover them.
They don't like the attention. We're getting the attention.
It's weird. It feels like they're perving on us a little bit. It's kind of creeping us out. New York, you're creeping us out a little bit. So this one says, so I was reading this article and I was like, all right. By the way, I met with the guy. There's a guy who recently wrote an article about San Francisco. I forget, New York Magazine or whatever. And I met with him. And we were talking about, like, people here becoming billionaires and stuff like that. He's like, well, yeah, there's 5 billionaires in San Francisco, but there's 57 billionaires in New York. Yeah. I was like, boy, he had that number super handy too, by the way. But I was like, yeah, that's probably right. Like, you probably have way more billionaires than we do. Yeah. Like, it seems, it's nuts. But so here's what struck me about this article. So first of all, they say, out in the Bay Area, it's becoming a foam party. So I've never heard of a
foam party. Foam party is where you're in a dance hall with DJs.
Is it? It's not a thing, is it?
It's a thing.
Oh, fuck!
It's Ibiza. It started in Ibiza, I believe.
Holy crap! This is a real thing.
It's a real thing. They shoot foam out of cannons, and then you're dancing in like 3 or 4 feet of foam.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a real thing. I would say it probably there were many of those in the .com days. In fact.
Yeah, okay, so that's not what's happening here in New York, if that's what a foam party is. And by the way, it sounds a little unsanitary to me.
It's kind of gross.
Yes, it sounds kind of gross. Yeah, no, we're not doing that.
Okay.
And then they said there'd be when the bubble collapses, which they seem gleeful about. Like, they seem ready for our bubble to collapse.
They're psyched.
They said there may be some Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, great use of your German lit major. But the maybe, like, you guys... If it's possible to have Schadenfreude or Freund, if it's possible to have that before something goes wrong, I think New York writers have that right now.
They're wishing it.
So then they say, what's going to happen if when the market collapses, people are going to stop buying green juice, electric cars, and condos.
That's so patronizing.
Which I thought was a little mean-spirited.
Yeah, absolutely.
The car. So New York, you guys don't drive cars, but okay. The electric cars are just because it's better for the environment, right? Like, that's not a douchey thing to do. It's just like, well, we don't want to use gas. All right.
They see it as the wimpy West Coast. That's the wimpy West Coast thing.
Yeah.
That's how they see it.
Okay. Well, so I guess we'd all go buy like this V8.
Right.
You know.
I want a Chevy Tahoe.
Yeah. And then the green juice, like, well, you make juice green with either like broccoli or kale. Right. Like,
I think they're kind of conflating the LA lifestyle with a little bit of the Silicon Valley lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think people are just eating the green juice because it makes them feel like healthier. And
cleansing is popular.
And the most like expensive, like, what's the most expensive bunch of broccoli costs? Like $5 maybe? Like,
Yeah.
what, isn't like a cocktail in Manhattan like 10 or 15?
Oh, at least.
Yeah. And then buying condos, like, ouch. Like, we do that here. Like,
Yeah.
don't they do that in New York too?
I
It's really
believe
weird.
so. Yes.
And then here's the part where then everyone's going to stop buying yachts and Hawaii vacation homes. Like, what the hell do people think goes on in New York? Like, what? I don't know anybody with either a yacht or a vacation home in Hawaii. It's just it's sort of like they're fabricating this cartoon vision of like
Absolutely.
like, do you New Yorkers all have like hot dogs with mustard for breakfast? Like,
Well, no, actually, they have places in the Hamptons for the summer is what they do.
yeah. What the? It's like, jeez. I don't know. We did deserve it, but anyway.
I don't know. I can't quite figure out either. I know exactly where you're trying to go with that, and it's I mean, maybe we didn't put enough of their bankers in jail, or
Yeah, it's becoming a lit job. Oh, I think what it is it's probably pure jealousy, which is that you can be an investment maker making $10 million a year, but you need like a lot of those years to get to 17 billion that the WhatsApp guy did in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think that you can't get there. Like, you can get to being an investment banker.
They're jealous of the time scale. There you go.
Yeah, and I think the money. Like, you
Yeah.
can get to being an investment. You can say, I'm going to be an investment banker. I'm going to work. I'm going to go to Wharton. I'm going to whatever the hell it is. You can.
Right.
There's a way there. You can't say I'm going to create WhatsApp. You need to be a passionate guy. You need to be the Russian immigrant who learns to code, and I mean, you can't. You just have to go down this different journey that they don't know how to. You wouldn't know how to go down if you're a banker or
It's
something.
like polar opposite. Exactly.
Yeah.
Much more creative.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think the average person in New York spends more than 12 seconds a year thinking about San Francisco. I would guess at the end of the day.
Other than in wintertime when they want to come visit, perhaps.
Yeah, but then they do.
Yeah.
They said, fuck it, we got plans. Like, we're going down to Florida or whatever. So, all right. You ready to wrap it up?
Sure.
This is a great conversation.
Yeah,
Thanks
it was good.
Thanks for
It was
talking.
good.
So this has been the Something Ventured podcast. Eric Hall has been the great guest.
Hopefully you're back again someday.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening.